Thank you for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
Could you introduce yourself and let everybody know a little bit about your history?
Well, my name is Shawn Martinbrough. I have been an illustrator, professional illustrator since 1992. Before that, I've been drawing pretty much since elementary school. I'm a native New Yorker, so somewhere around, I don't know, maybe like fourth or fifth grade, I think my mom and my dad noticed that I had a penchant for drawing. Back in the day, kids used to bring metal lunchboxes to school before there were metal detectors and stuff like that. And I had a Star Wars lunchbox, and I used to copy that. And one day, my mom and my dad noticed that. They said, "Hey, you know what? You know, he might have a little bit of a gift there." And they decided to enroll me in a community center painting class. And where I grew up I grew up in the Bronx in New York, and I grew up in a place called Co-op City. And there was a community center there, and they enrolled me in a painting class that, met maybe once or twice a week. And I started painting with acrylics, and that really gave me a great amount of focus in terms of just, my artistic ability. And then from there, I went to the High School of Music and Art, which is the basis for the Fame movie, the Fame School. And from music and art, I got my degree, my bachelor's of fine arts degree in illustration at the School of Visual Arts, also in New York City. And while I was a junior at SVA, I got my first work from Marvel Comics in 1992. And fortunately, I've been working as a professional artist since then.
Wow. And what was the first one you worked on?
Marvel had a division called Epic at the time. They had a license for Clive Barker's Hellraiser movies. And they were doing these painted graphic novels. And my first job was doing a painted illustration for the Clive Barker Hellraiser series, which was great. And then from there, I think I did another illustration, and then I did a short story. And then I did my first painted work, which was like a 64, I think it was like a 64 pages painted graphic novel called Tales of the Marvels Blockbuster. This came out after there was a huge wave of painted artwork that was kicked off by Alex Ross. Alex Ross did the Marvels, which was an amazing series, and then Marvel said, "Hey, let's put out more painted books." And I was one of the wave of guys that did it, and I think we pretty much burned that out. And they said, "Okay, you know what? It costs more to pay people to paint a graphic novel, so let's kind of phase this out and go back to doing regular books."
Even though they look beautiful.
You know what? I mean, I think they were cool, and it was a great first project. But and the money was nice, and I was still, and so it was. I think at that point I might have graduated college at that point. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, I remember one of the first comics that actually made me realize that comics were more than just, I guess you could say, like funny books, was Kingdom Come.
Oh, okay.
I had a teacher that handed that to me.
How old are you, Frank?
I am going to be 33 in a couple of months.
My God, you're a young, and Kingdom Come was the first book that made you take comics seriously?
Well, I grew up in a country town, like literally cows were my neighbors.
Get out. And what country town is this?
This little tiny town called Brunswick, up in upstate New York.
Okay. All right. Well, they can get kind of country up in upstate.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So when my biggest access to comics, like I would read comics, but they were, they're an indulgence for a kid.
Okay.
And that's all they are, But then I actually had a teacher that saw me reading a comic, saw me reading Wizard, and he's like, "You want to read this?" And it changed the way I looked at comics.
The Kingdom Come is a great project. One of my favorites from Alex Ross.
So, and that one always stuck with me. So and not only the art, but the story and the everything. I guess you could say the themes and
great storytelling, and written by the great Mark Waid.
Yep.
And Alex Ross just did an amazing job.
Now, you went from Marvel and you actually worked on Batman as well, and that's one of the most iconic characters of all time. So how did that feel when you got that call?
Well, it was really great because to think about, you're a kid from the Bronx drawing one of the most iconic characters in the world. It's awesome. When I was approached to draw Detective Comics, and I was the regular, I was going to be the regular artist on that series, it was amazing, and I was really excited about the project, and I was really humbled and just, let's do it. It was a really great experience just to sort of, work with the Batman office. My buddy Joe Illidge had really put the word in Denny O'Neil, who was like the Batman group editor. He put the word in put the buzz in his ear about, hey, you should check out this guy, Shawn Martinbrough. And then once he convinced Denny O'Neil and Mark Chiarello, who was the art director, they gave me a shot. It was really awesome to do. And working with Greg Rucka, who was such an amazing writer, and a really great guy, it was just a really great experience.
Yeah, and you have a very distinct style, and it seemed to lend itself really well to Batman, that noir style. So it felt like a really good fit.
Yeah, I think probably one of the only regret I would have about that time drawing Detective Comics was that I wish I could have inked myself.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that you really realize in this industry. When you are simply a penciler, you are at the mercy of your inker.
Okay.
And if you have a great inker, they can make your work look better. If you're with a inker that's not so compatible, it might not turn out the way you want. And I think after working on Detective, I said, okay, I prefer to ink my own stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Now, when you ink, just out of curiosity, are you inking with the idea in mind that this is going to be color, or do you ink to make it look as best as possible in black and white?
The latter.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually see my artwork in black and white, so it's almost like a little bit of a surprise to me when I see the colored pages.
Okay.
Because I don't even see it. I don't see color at all. It's just strictly black and white, and I just try to make it look as interesting as possible in the black and white form.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what drew you to comics? What was that moment of, I want to draw comics?
It was also in elementary school. I just started reading the stories. I think maybe a friend had a comic book. I'm not really sure how that first book got in my hands, but I just started reading the stories, and they were just they really just took you to another place. And the fact that they can suck you into this story and these characters and these situations, I really enjoyed. And so I just started, I think I picked up one Marvel comic, and then that led to me picking up another comic, okay, which is part of their master plan, because that's how they make their money.
Yeah.
Because at those days, I would probably buy maybe 15 titles or so, 15 Marvel titles a month, and each title had a different artist that I was like, wow, this is great. This artist makes Captain America look different. This artist makes the Fantastic Four different. This artist makes Daredevil different. And there were certain artists that I really started gravitating to because their styles were just so dramatic. Like Frank Miller, okay, his run on Daredevil was amazing. I mean, those books, today they still inspire me. Walt Simonson on Thor, amazing stuff. John Byrne on the X-Men, and then he jumped to Fantastic Four. You had, and there's so many artists that and then as you go on, that you just add more artists to the group of people that inspire you. So that's really what inspired me.
Yeah, that's actually you ended up answering my follow-up question, which is okay. I was going to ask what artists inspired you.
I mean, there's so many. Art Adams, Sal Buscema, John Romita Jr., John Romita, Jack Kirby, Alex Toth, who is an amazing artist. He did so many great designs for the Hanna-Barbera, World of Super Adventure cartoon series, which probably is ahead of your time.
No, I know what you're talking
about. You know
about
it? Okay, Frank, I really have some respect for you now, because that's, what, that's amazing work. And so many artists, Bill Sienkiewicz, who was a little bit later, but Bill brought a whole mainstream illustration style to comic books. And when I say mainstream illustration, there are artists that will do book covers or they will do advertising, and it's a whole separate industry from comic books. And Bill really brought this whole dynamic, stylized, very graphic, colorful approach to comics. And like some of his classic books were Electra Assassin, which Frank Miller also wrote. He did a Daredevil graphic novel, one of the first really original graphic novels, because the term graphic novel is a fairly new. The fact that people use it all the time now is sort of like a new term. And when I say new term, maybe like in the last 10 years. But comic books were known as comic books. And then sometime, I think might be in the 80s, Marvel had released larger editions of comic books.
Okay.
And these were more adult, more sophisticated in terms of the stories that they were telling. I think one of the first ones was God Loves, Man Kills, which was written by Chris Claremont and illustrated by Bernie. No, I was going to say Bernie Wrightson. It wasn't Bernie Wrightson. It was, God, I'm blanking on his name. So familiar. He ended up drawing Astro City. Oh, man. God. All right, I'm so sorry. I mean, I love that artist. But anyway, Bill Sienkiewicz did one of the first graphic novels, which was amazing. And so that kind of storytelling really spoke to me. So there's so many artists, I can't even begin to name them all.
Okay. Now, being somebody who's been in the field since pre-digital to now digital, how has the art of making a comic changed in that time?
Well, for me, it hasn't, because I do it the old-fashioned way. But I have a lot of contemporaries, a lot of colleagues that use comic books to draw. Like they will draw on a Wacom tablet.
Okay.
There is no pencil, ink. Their hands are not dirty at all. They've just completely removed that element of drawing comics. And for me, like I'm a little bit of an older guy, so I grew up drawing with my hands. So I don't really have an interest in making that jump. But to a lot of people, they say it's a really great medium to use. Unfortunately, when you do that, you are removing yourself from a secondary form of income, which is the originals.
Okay.
Like this page is valuable now because it's an original page. But if you draw something completely in the computer, you can only sell someone a print.
Okay. And is this something that's still being taught? Are people that are younger coming in and still doing it the old-fashioned way, or are they just skipping that and going directly to the digital?
I think it really depends. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of kids these days, since technology is so much more dominant than when I was a kid, I think that a lot of them would be naturally inclined to draw on a computer.
Okay.
But I think if you go to an art school, I can't imagine that art schools are just strictly teaching kids to just draw primarily on a computer.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot to be learned from drawing from life, drawing from using charcoal and different types of pens, pencils or brushes that I think that really add to your development as an artist.
Okay. So you don't think that this is going away anytime soon?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's primarily for what I said about the secondary market in terms of being able to sell your originals.
Okay.
There are people that make a pretty good living selling original, copies of their work.
So as an artist, you get to keep these, and they're yours that you can turn around and sell.
Yes. The way the process works with comics is that Marvel and DC, for example, they own the rights to the content, meaning I can't take this piece of artwork and go print it myself and make my own copy.
Okay.
But the artwork itself, the tangible artwork, is mine.
Okay.
So whenever you see someone draw a comic book, that artist, the penciler and the inker get those originals back.
Okay.
And usually, if you do both, like me, I get everything back. But for the if it's split between a penciler and an inker, then they kind of have to divvy up the pie. And I remember many a times when I would work with John Paul Leon, and we were working together on a series called Static for Milestone. And whenever we would it would be time to get the originals back, it would be like we were swapping baseball cards. I'd say, okay, I'll give you this page for that page. And since I gave you that page, you got to give me this page.
Okay.
And it was fun times, but yeah, that's pretty much how it's done.
That's never even realized that.
Yeah.
It's just that there's a whole secondary market.
Yeah.
That's cool. Now, you are a part of Jeppy's Milestone exhibit. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about that, about the importance of that exhibit?
Well, it was It was an honor to be asked to be part of the exhibit. I know one of the co-curator, Michael Davis. We go back a ways, and I was there when Milestone was first started, and I know that Milestone was a really cool company with a lot of great ideas, and to be part of an exhibit that celebrates what Milestone was in terms of a forward-thinking, diverse company. It was really a nice feeling to be a part of it.
Okay. And now, in my opinion, there have been strides made, but as of recently, how do you feel about the state of representation and diversity, not only in the comics, but in the field?
Well, listen, it's like this. The world, there's racism in the world. So racism is not going, the comic book industry is not going to be, devoid of racism. I think, are there certain people that might have agendas in the comic book industry? Yes. A lot of times I think it just comes down to people just sort of surrounding themselves with people that they live with or they surround themselves with. So if you grew up in Long Island, which is a section of New York, which is, you could say it's predominantly white, and all of your friends are white, and so chances are your colleagues are going to be white. When it comes to hiring someone, you're probably going to hire someone that you're familiar with.
Okay.
I think that that's only natural. For me as a creative person growing up in New York was such an amazing experience for me because there were people from all different walks of life and ethnicities, which made, I think, it made my growing up very rich in terms of the experience. Co-op City, for example, where I grew up in the Bronx, was a mixture of Jews, blacks, Hispanics, Italians. So I really grew up with a lot of friends, a lot of people from different, ethnic backgrounds. I actually kind of feel sorry for people that just grow up in all monolithic communities because it's kind of boring, I think. I think that there's so much that you can learn and be inspired from with people who have different walks of, different opinions or different life experiences. So that's why it's kind of interesting that if you have a company like Marvel or DC, and I'm just saying those because those are the two biggest companies, and if you have so many different characters, I would think that you would want to have so many different voices tell stories.
Right.
Versus having people that are coming from the same experience, writing and drawing all the books. It's very interesting because when Vertigo was first started, Vertigo is sort of like the more adult wing of DC Comics. They're their own company. They have their own characters and their own separate universe. And sometimes they'll pluck characters from the DC universe and do a Vertigo spin on them. But when Karen Berger, who was the editor-in-chief of Vertigo, and she really started it, she went and tapped writers from England and from Europe to write those books. So you had Neil Gaiman, you had Alan Moore, you had so many other writers there that were coming from a whole different experience. Now, granted, those guys are white, but there was like a different kind of white.
Well, and you can definitely tell when you look at those comics versus other comics at the time.
And I think that just sort of adding different voices to the mix ultimately makes the pot that much more interesting.
Okay. And with the Milestones exhibit, if somebody was to go see it, what would you want them to pull out of it?
I probably would say that it's important for people to see that people of color are working in the industry. Because I think that also helps with diversity, because when people realize that, oh, you know what, this person can draw as well, or kids, and this is for me being a black man, it's amazing when I have young black boys or girls come up to me and say, wow, you draw comics? That's great. I didn't know that someone who looks like me draws comics. And then that's a really profound experience to have, because it just says that I can do it too. And it's funny because it also works when when white folks maybe they're like, oh wow, you're black, that's interesting. And it also kind of makes people say, okay, I can accept that this person's doing it. And so maybe if they're in a position of hiring someone, even if it has nothing to do with comics, they can say, okay, like I can see this person working in this role. I can accept it.
Now, did you have that moment when you were younger? Did you have that moment where you found out that one of your favorite artists was African American, or is that something that's sadly newer in the world?
You know, it was definitely an experience that happened to me later in life because also the thing about comics is that it's such a faceless medium. You don't know what these people look like. You just see their names. And sometimes, like unless they have a very ethnic sounding name, you just don't know who they are. It's so funny because George Perez was one of my favorite artists. It never dawned on me that he was a Latino. You know, like even though George Perez, I mean, come on, I mean, like that's a pretty ethnic sounding name, but I never made the connection that, oh wow, okay, he's a Latino guy. Like one of the most phenomenal artists who's one of my favorite, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Okay.
Say that 4 times.
I'm not even gonna try.
He is a phenomenal artist, and he's done so much work. Like DC has had him under lock and key for like for decades. But I would say, yeah. But just going to answer your question about was that a realization? I was fortunate because when I was in high school, I took a cartooning class at a community center. It was at a different community center. It was a nonprofit organization called the Children's Art Carnival in Harlem. The Children's Art Carnival of Harlem. And that's where I met Michael Davis, who was the co-curator of the Milestones exhibit. And the thing that I always credit Davis with is that he exposed me to working professionals in the industry.
Okay.
So I think that from an early age, I did sort of see that there were people of color. Like Dennis Cowan was someone who was Michael's best friend, and Dennis, you know, I met Dennis a long time ago, and so I've always accepted, yeah, there are people of color that draw. But it was interesting later on when I was a working professional and I would meet people, you know, face to face. I'd be like, oh wow, Brian Stelfreeze, who's an amazing artist, is black.
Well, and I think that with the internet now, that it's a lot easier to find that out too.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you are a editor that does not want to hire black folks, you can screen them out by going to Google or whatever. So it's easy.
Which is just sad, but
That'll be edited, I'm sure.
a couple more questions, and I think we're good. With the Milestones exhibit, there are contemporary. What am I trying to say? There are contemporary artists that are in it, but it also goes back quite a few years. Is it nice to be set with art that has been from the past to now and seeing that progression?
Sure. It's great to be included in a group of people. Like Kyle Baker is part of the exhibit, and I've been a huge fan of Kyle Baker's for years. So it's very humbling to sort of have my work next to Kyle's. It's like, wow, you know, Kyle, that's Kyle Baker. And it's great to see some, you know, artists that got into the industry after myself, you know, and say, oh, you know, I'm a fan of their work as well. So it's great to be part of that group.
Okay. Now you work on Thief of Thieves. That's your current. And how long has that been going on? You've been since the beginning.
Yes. Thief of Thieves has been going on, oh God, I'm trying to remember what year it debuted, maybe 2012, I think. No, maybe. I'm not sure. It's been, yeah, we're 25 issues into it.
Okay.
You know, it's been an amazing experience.
And is this pretty much what you're working on right now? Is there anything else in the future that's coming out, or are you just with Thief of Thieves?
Yeah, Thief of Thieves is my primary project that I'm working on. It's a monthly series, and so it's just that's my main responsibility to do. I have worked on other projects. I try to find time, if I can, to squeeze in other projects. I did a really interesting project for an architectural real estate firm in New York. That they hired me to do a graphic novel for their campaign. It's going to be like a high-end condominium, and they really liked my style, and they wanted me to create like a small graphic novel that they would send to potential buyers of the condo.
So weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's going to be like a really nice. It's going to be like a very high-end package that they're going to put together. I think Ducati, they're actually designing. Somehow they're involved with the condos. I think they're either designing some of the interiors, and they're actually going to do. I've been told that they're going to do real versions of the costumes that I had the characters wearing in the graphic novel. So that was a great project. Excuse me. Occasionally, I might do some storyboarding work for commercials, but primarily Thief of Thieves is my baby. That's pretty much what I'm working on.
Okay, and this is going to be off the thread we're going, but something that I wanted to ask, and I just remembered. Being an artist, being somebody who is constantly having to come up with new ideas, new drawings, how much do you rely on looking back at the past, at old comics for inspiration?
Not so much old comics. I use a ton of reference.
Okay.
So whenever I have a story, I look to say, okay, I do research, and I try to make the characters and the situations look authentic.
Okay.
So I am constantly, researching, and that a lot of times, you have to look at the past to be inspired to, create something that's forward thinking. So a lot of times, that's my connection to looking in the past. Old comic books, I guess, are pretty much burned into my brain in terms of what I'm pulling from. Okay. So, excuse me, I can tell you, there might be a sequence here that I know that I'm pulling from something. Now you can't rip it off because that's corny. That's just that's an old school. You can't just swipe someone's stuff. But there could be a sequence here or there that I'm inspired by.
It's almost like paying homage to it.
Yeah, but you know what? You can't. You got to remix it. You can't do a straight rip because, like I said, that's just corny. And there are a lot of people that do that, and I don't really buy into that homage thing. I mean, but you know what? There is a cover for Thief of Thieves that I did that I guess could fit into that homage. And this was a cover, I forget the issue, it might have been issue number 7. And it was a cover design that I did give a nod to the classic X-Men Days of Future Past cover, where that cover had Wolverine in front, Wolverine and an old Kitty Pryde in front of a big sort of spreadsheet of all of the mutants that have been killed.
I know that one, yeah.
Okay, it's a great cover. Now, I'm sure it's been made, well, a lot more people have been made aware of this cover because of the movie, but that was a classic cover. And so for Thief of Thieves, I had a character, I sort of gave a nod to that design, and I had our main character Conrad running away with like a piece of artwork under his arm because he's the world's best. He's a master thief, and I had all of his sort of colleagues on that same kind of a spreadsheet, like either like with X's over their faces or whatever. And so that's like I think the closest I would come to paying homage to something. Yeah. But typically, you got to mix it up. Okay. Yeah, you got to mix it up.
Okay. Now, is there any other projects you're working on that people should check out?
There is a project I'm very excited about. It's called The Wren, and it's set in the Harlem Renaissance, and it's going to be published by First Second Books. I am co-writing it with Joe Illidge, and the artwork is going to be done by a phenomenal artist named Gray Williamson. And the way we pitched it to First Second Books, it's Fame meets Boardwalk Empire set in the Harlem Renaissance.
Now, it's a fictional story, but it's set in a factual time.
Yes, so which is very fun, but also very challenging because we are sort of working around real historical events, but plugging our fictional characters into it. So,
kind of like, and not to pull from a video game, but like Assassin's Creed is a fictional game, but as I was reading, every single assassination that happens in it actually happened in real life.
I don't know that video game, but that sounds pretty close. Okay. I would probably say a really good comparison would be like Titanic. Okay. Where, you have the Leo character and the Kate Winslet character that are fictional characters, but they're on a real boat during a real event. Okay. And so, so our graphic novel is really it's centered around the time of the Cotton Club. Okay. But we have a fictional Cotton Club type club, and it's a really exciting project that I'm looking forward to. We're actually working on the final revision of the script now.
Okay. Now, why? Just that sounds like a weird question, but why that time period? What drew you to do this?
It's we've felt, Joe and I felt that it's a period in time that I think deserves to get more of a spotlight. And I think it was a really influential time. It was a very important time in terms of creativity for America and African Americans and Black Americans and a time where you had a lot of Black artists and writers, and it was like an explosion of just creativity. And I think that that's an important time to showcase.
And that's with comics. It's kind of like with a movie. There's that perfect way of exposing somebody to history without actually saying, "Here's the history."
Yeah, you don't want to be like message. You don't want to hit him over the head. You want to sort of give your history lesson in a very entertaining way, where people say, "Oh, wait, I didn't realize that this was a history lesson." And hopefully, by our characters interacting with other historical characters and in this really important time in Harlem, it would inspire people to sort of say, "Oh, hey, let me look more into that part of that part of American history."
That's really cool. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, it's very exciting. The designs that Gray Williamson has done so far are just amazing. So I can't wait until he can really get cracking on the script.
Excellent. And do you have any other projects that anybody should check out?
I always recommend people check out my art instruction book called How to Draw Noir, The Art and Technique of Visual Storytelling. It's published by Random House. It's a great way. A lot of times, many times over the years, have been approached by men, women, mothers, fathers saying, "Hey, I have a son or I have a daughter that loves comics, or they love to draw, and I'm not really sure what I should do to really support that." And I think that and so I saw the book as a great way to not only let people know about how I got into comics and how I became an artist, and it's also a way to sort of let people know how I visualize things and how I apply my storytelling to my sense of style to storytelling. So it's a great book.
And noir style, I was always personally drawn to that, not only with comics but like movies, because that's where I come from first. I'm a movie fan.
Me too.
So it's nice to see a style that I can't say it ever really went out of fashion, but it comes and goes. And you get films where you'll get a run of a bunch of films that are in noir style, and it just kind of moves away and then comes back.
See, I don't ever think that the noir style ever goes. I think that I think you always have directors out there that could be considered noir.
Okay.
Like I'm a huge film and television buff, and you could say that The Godfather is noir. You could say that Seven is noir.
Yeah.
The film Seven by David Fincher, who's one of my favorite directors. It's funny because your colleague, Craig, with a K, was reading one of my books downstairs. That it's a book on Jerry Bruckheimer.
Okay.
And Jerry Bruckheimer, I've really admired Jerry Bruckheimer's work ever since he was part of the Simpson Bruckheimer producing team. And they put out some of the most influential movies in cinema history. And I would always get into debates with people about this. And I'm like, think about the movie, what they did, Jerry Bruckheimer, is that they sought out commercial and commercial directors to bring their storytelling style to film.
Okay.
And so a lot of the directors that they first teamed up with were Tony Scott, you had Adrian Lyne, so there's a third person. But a lot of the guys that they brought on had a very stylized way of shooting film. And Tony Scott was, he passed away about a year or so ago, one of my favorite directors. Every frame of that guy's films are like paintings to me. They're just amazing. And you could say that he's a noir. You could say he's got a noir sense of style about him. But going back but to go back to the Jerry Bruckheimer, the reason why I bring him up is that style that I think that people like Tony Scott and Adrian Lyne, and I'm forgetting the third one that they.
Michael Bay, is it?
Michael Bay. Well, Michael Bay is a descendant of Tony Scott.
Okay.
He is a descendant of Tony Scott, and you could tell that he worshipped at Tony Scott's altar. So he has that very stylized look about himself. But what Jerry Bruckheimer did was that when he jumped into television with CSI,
Okay.
CSI changed the look of television.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if you look at the first, CSI brought that style of filmmaking to television, and now you have comedies that look slick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a whole different way of visualizing the medium.
Okay. And I think that's pretty much it. So thank you very much for talking with us. And I urge everybody to check out his art. I don't know which camera to look at because
This one.
this one. Check out his art. It's phenomenal. It really
Thank you.
is.